think, the real problem isn't education, it's the alignment. And we've done something really powerful. We've managed to give free education from primary to tertiary. So it isn't that we are not educated, but it is we are producing not necessarily what the economy needs. So we actually are walking into a crisis of credentialism, where you now all of a sudden for a job have to apply with a degree which formerly didn't even require a degree. And that's actually not progress, that's pressure. So if we supply degree holders more than the economy has a capacity to employ, that's a problem. Yeah. And we see that government has allocated 28 billion of the available 106 billion to education. But hence the point, if there is not an alignment, what we produce in graduates with what we need, we've got a very real problem to deal with.
Okay, but speaking of education, I mean, you've touched on the issue of education is not necessarily the problem, whereas at times, for instance, if I have to make an example of myself, I did sports management. Never in my life did I think I would ever be in front of a camera or, for instance, ask questions to fellow prime ministers or to other ministers or just prominent members. What then what message does it send out to someone who's in high school to say, look, today I'm going to do engineering, but I might go do something else?
Yes. So I think the pressure is on. The youth are confronted with new things. AI has changed the landscape completely. So we have an oversupply on soft skills, like in social sciences or your administrative skills, and a very real gap in terms of the hard skills. So your engineers or just venturing into sectors like agriculture and sustainability, into AI and big data, but also I think not so much emphasis on education or nursing and doctors. We need the real hard practical skills. So even plumbing or mechanics, something where you have a skill that can add value to the environment. That's what we really, really need. So our students need to confront a reality where agriculture and sustainability, AI and big data, manufacturing, and a skill set that can add value to your environment is becoming more important than just the title or the pieces of paper that I have in my hand.
Okay, I mean, you've touched on a very important question, and you've mentioned the word oversupply, and you've touched on education, nursing, which often are one of the sectors people often tend to shift to, and it's quite crowded. But if you look at it, I mean, if you look at majority of the people and where they stand, the foundation comes to education, which is then provided by the teachers. And if you look at it, do you really feel our education system really preps our teachers in a way that they can educate our learners to say, look, it's not a problem if you go to VTC today to do plumbing, to do A, B, C, and D. That's fine, because you can also contribute to some extent to the economy. It's not a problem if you do A, B, C, and D. Where do you think that core element lies within our system?
Well, it's a very important question. And I mean, if we truly had all the answers and implemented, we wouldn't be in this situation. I think, which I always fight with, is data doesn't lie. It holds real truth. And we have an unemployment rate of youth at 44%. And that's huge. I mean, never mind being underemployed, unemployment is a real issue. So that means that if 10,000 graduates enter the market and maybe 2,000 jobs are created, only 20% stand a chance of getting a job. So they must either wait or they must adapt. And now this skill of adaptability, so integrating, new AI systems or let's say fields of learning or creating awareness amongst the youth of where those skill gaps are. I mean, with energy and hydrogen, there are so many different fields that our youth can start venturing into, be it from logistics or engineering or scientific research. But those are what we need to prepare for. It's not whether it's coming, it is definitely the future. And then, entrepreneurship, yes, this is very much supported and advocated for. But here we also have very hard statistics to deal with. So about 97% of SMEs actually are considered non-bankable. So there we've got compliance and regulatory issues, which has to be addressed, but still 97% of them. So now we have, and that was, I think, on the 24th of March by the Namibian CEO of the Tourism Board stated. And then, furthermore, about 90% of SMEs fail within the first 5 years of operating. And about 75% of those SMEs report that they had really hard challenges, like almost to the break point, just within the first 5 months. So now this means that if you only have a 10% success possibility, that you will have to fail 9 times before you succeed. And we don't have the luxury of failing, most Namibians. We don't have failure capital. So then, if you're non-bankable, if you're a small business, how do you build forward and succeed without failure capital? So that's a real issue that we have to address. Now we've got our Bank of Namibia, our Development Bank, our commercial banks, and most of them have really started changing and realizing that you have to, even in your corporate social investment, co-create value by your clever partnerships. You have to work on your financial literacy of your communities in order to give them those skills to succeed and to advocate for themselves. To be a small business, broke and hustling, that's more than enough to deal with. But then to have that financial stress and no support on top of that, that's where you really get people struggling. And I can refer to many small businesses where we've learned so many hard lessons that there are just some basic rules nowadays. You can't be a solo hustler. You really need to collaborate. You need to save on resources. You need the skills sets and the financial risk to be equal or shared. And you have to have a proper knowledge of how to manage your finances. So from the administration and accounting, of course, through to tax and compliance. And that's not something you just learn, oh, by the way. It's something we have to entrench from childhood, that it's an important asset or skill to have when you venture into either corporate or any field of business. There's no master's degree that doesn't incorporate financial management. It's absolutely part of the must know.
If you look at some of our young people, especially those who are in university trying to meet ends meet, of people having 9 to 5, also having a hustling side hustle basically on the side, to just keep up with the economy that's constantly just rising. Do you think these problems, and I know you've mentioned that these things have to be entrenched from childhood, but for those, let's say for instance myself, are these problems of not meeting compliance met with a lack of education, or is it just basically someone who just sticks to be ignorant?
Well, again, you raise a very important point. I think what we have here is a mindset problem, because the way we grew up with things is not necessarily the way it's continued to work in the job market. So we have to move from job seeking to value creation. If you bring value to the table, you are very much in a better position to be employable, to be relatable, and to be heard. So whether you've got a strong voice or you've got a skill set on farming or anything that you've learned, you can actually nowadays get to a small side degree on sustainability farming or sustainability living which we can send our children to in holidays. In my days, we worked
Yeah.
since you were 10 years old,
Yeah.
hustling in a shop.
Yes.
But now, perhaps we need to start sending our children to these workshops so that they can actually just be exposed to, hey, it's my responsibility to be interested and show interest and participate. So not just to seek that approval or seek that opportunity, but to create something that makes you want to be pulled into that pool of opportunity.
Okay, I mean, it's quite insightful on some of the things you've touched, especially on the fact that it all comes down to a mindset. But if you happen to look at the age structures, and there's always this battle between some people saying, you don't need education, you don't need a degree, go into the business, do A, B, C, and D. And at the same time, you find people with, let's say, with a whole, that are fully decorated in terms of their academics, with high paying jobs and what so forth. How then do we, for instance, take a 10-year-old to say, look, develop this skill, A, B, C, and D, without trying to fully take away that childhood from them?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, we're not some other countries which will not be mentioned.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is value in really bringing education in on a grassroots level. A, don't take away a child's imagination. B, provoke curiosity. So how can we make a child curious about booming sectors in our economy? We have to start creating awareness,
Yeah.
and we have to present it to them creatively. So when it comes to boardroom talk, corporate speak, I mean, that is dead to the individual growing up, nurturing their dreams and where they want to invest their talents in. So we have to make it very practical in terms of how your mathematical or your spokesperson skills to make an engineer's work relatable to the child or the on the street or the normal person or even an investor or a co-partner.
Oh yeah, Namibia is a constitutional state,
Yes.
which means that we are governed by the rule of law. Literally all aspects of life, be it civilian, be it commercial, be it, in this instance, labor relations,
Yes.
is statutorily provided for. In this instance, you have a minister of labor, amongst others, as you say, intervening in instances of labor dispute. Nothing wrong with that. However, when it's done, it must be done with circumvention and with due respect to those statutory instruments that are placed there to provide exactly for that. As to statutory intervention, Parliament, our lawmakers, they deemed it necessary to specifically provide for institutions such as, for instance, the Labour Commissioner,
Yes.
Labour Inspectors, Labour Court, and there is a circumscribed procedure covering the entire life cycle of a labor dispute,
Yes.
from inception, going back to arbitration, mediation, adjudication, and eventually an outcome for the parties therein. So as you can see, scope for ministerial invention in that mechanism of dispute resolution is very, very, very limited, because a minister, by his constitutional mandate and appointment, once he's appointed by the president, operated at an entirely different level. Most importantly, at the level of policy. Policy, hopefully, which is informed policy, which impacts on the contents of legislation, policy that direct, for instance, what is the philosophy our labor legislation would follow.
Yes.
So if you have this instance of intervention by a public officer at that level in disputes of any nature, then you create a dangerous precedent. And when, and I think this must be underlined, when concerns are being expressed in this instance, it's not concerns necessarily only from employer perspective, because mind you, employees themselves, the public sector in general, private sector is heavily impacted on this, because on the one side, as you've pointed out, there is a statutorily provided for mechanism for resolving and dealing with labor disputes. You have a minister tasked with overseeing the industry as a whole, not only for employees, not only for public service, not only for employers, but for the entire tripartite system. So through social dialogue, and it's through this type of engagement that you get policies and legislation that regulate us all in terms of what is to be made. Now, with this particular topic which we are addressing, the question then arises on the one that I have already asked before. What is the criteria for ministerial intervention in an instance of labor disharmony? Is there a criterion for this, or does the minister get to pick him or herself? Secondly, when the minister does so, is there a temporary suspension of the mechanism provided for by law? The answer, I think, is self-evident. The mechanism provided for still remain, and nothing by way of constitutional mandate, ministerial mandate, extend as far as the minister becoming an adjudicator and becoming, if you want, a warrant executor through directives in terms of what is to be made or not. Of more important, we're talking about job creation, we're talking about investment in the country. You can imagine if, by way of advice to any investor who wants to come in the country, you want to lay out your labor regime in terms of how that relationship between an employer and employee is covered. And on the one side, you've got the law in precise terms, in very specific terms, indicating what is the route to be followed in order to achieve a certain outcome, regulating harmony between employer and employee if it's a labor dispute. And on the one side, he or she might have well have picked up that, wait a moment, there are instances in which ministers actually can intervene towards resolving a dispute, even in the middle of a retrenchment exercise, even in the middle of or at the onset of a dispute not yet registered. How, as an investor, or let's not go to investor, how, as a local employer, must I advise? At which juncture does the minister get involved? And when do you qualify for ministerial intervention? The lawyers will ask, is this mero meto? In other words, is this an intervention coming from the minister himself, or does he get to be invited? Can he refuse when he's invited to intervene in the dispute? And does it follow that once he intervenes and a directive is given through his intervention, that it can be refused? So what then happens? What happens is then the absence of predictability, consistency in applying your legislation, and most importantly, there's just no certainty on what is the legal regime applicable, because the minister is otherwise doing what is not, let's say, empowered to do. Once again, as I've stated from the beginning, it's not so much the intention he has, because we must accept that the intention the minister has in doing all of this is to bring about harmony, to resolve dispute. But then the danger is the consequences and impact of that intervention, where it's not codified, where it's not regulated, where there's basically a total absence of guidelines on when, how it happens. It brings about, unfortunately, chaos, which is not only detrimental to employers, but to employers themselves, because there might well be an instance where a union or an employee or a small and medium enterprise feels that they are not happy with the outcome of, say, judicial proceedings,
Yes.
do they in that instance ask for the ministerial intervention? And if so, can the minister say no? In other words, predictability, consistency is the concern that is being addressed, not so much the intention to bring about providing a solution
Yes.
to a dispute.
Yes. As they say, the
You know, as negotiators, you start higher,
Yes.
and then you end like that 15%.
Yeah.
Now we moved almost 8% down.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
understand?
Yes.
So if we went with 8% to the company,
Yeah.
where could we be now? We could maybe at 3%.
I understand.
So that's why us as negotiators, you aim high,
Yeah.
so but you know you can go, below
Yeah.
that what you are getting. And we also know what is the inflation rate.
Yes.
But as you are aware of this geopolitical, instability, so the inflation rate this year might go up.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, if you give that 3.5 or 5%, so it will be eaten up by the inflation rate. So the disposable income at the end of the day to a worker, because all others is statutory deductions such as union fees,
Yeah.
social security. Whenever you put that 5, it also goes up. Pension
Absolutely.
and so forth. So at the end of the day, that 5% will never be 5%. It will either be 3.5 or 3%.
Yeah.
You understand? So that's why as unions or as negotiators, we always aim for a higher increase. Even a double digit increase, which is really to attain it. It's a mountain to climb.
I understand.
Yeah.
When last did they get an increment?
No, last year they got an increase, which was, I think it was 6%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, I just want to understand these things, Lister. Workers, because we know also that there's a lot of challenges at MIDCO. And when we look at that, we must say, as a country, we must say that everybody at the company is responsible for the state of the company. In other words, if the company is limping, everybody from the top to bottom must be accountable for the state of affairs there. So, MIDCO, I'm sure in their conversations they are saying, look, we are unable, we don't have all the money, we don't have all these things. And the employees say, no, but because I see, for example, there was mention of 100 million. They say this year the company declared a profit of 100 million for the first time since its inception by failing to increase reasonable, to give reasonable increment. So if the company makes profit, it must immediately go to salaries, or what are you saying?
Yeah, I think that's what we believe, because the employees are the backbone of the company.
Yeah.
So once they produce, they expect also to be compensated accordingly.
Yeah.
You understand? So that is how the workers they perceive. Yeah, if the company do have whatever declared a profit of that magnitude,
Yeah.
why even those years where they did not have profit, but we used to get increase. So then they push us as a representative to making sure that we, we negotiate a better offer for them. As you know, in this country or the world over, the world now is very competitive. So if we cannot do it, another union will take over. So that's why we are saying that we need to making sure that we fight for the rights and interests of our members at all material times.
Yeah. The employees seem to have issues also with the constitution, how the board is constituted. They are saying that some people, they suspect that some people have allegiances or alliances to Savannah Beef. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, those are some of the issues which the petition was addressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the missing cattle.
Yeah.
So as it's linking. So we leaders in Afar, we don't know exactly, but the workers, they give that information. So us, what we do, we just do what we are informed by our members.
Yeah.
Yes. To deliver the message, because we are like messengers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you are a veteran union. You've been around for a long time. I mean, if you want to verify some of these things, are you not entitled as a representative of those workers just to demand some evidence from the company to say our members say that you guys did this or did that? Are you allowed? Where does your authority end?
Yeah, I think even in terms of negotiations, so we can still also, even the Labor Act number 11 of 2007, yeah, it's also clear in that regard, even in terms of to give the company, to give the union audited financial statements. And so we also believe that if they will reject some of those issues, if the workers really have, evidence or proof in that regard, so we'll need also maybe to go that further and say, can you prove, or our proof is here, if they will reject or they will deny those allegations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the issues of cattle, you know about it.
Yes.
So the worker also, I think it was last year who brought that matter.
Yeah.
Only to found later that yes, it was true.
Yeah.
Yeah, now there are still investigations, even though those investigations are delayed. We understand that that particular person is subjected to a disciplinary hearing, but that case is a criminal case. We anticipated that the one who is responsible was supposed to be in jail already, because that is it's a criminal matter.
Yeah.
And subject here, or maybe they'll do it later, but the workers are saying it has been delayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, either for those interests we've just mentioned, either is working with those other companies outside of MITCO, which we still don't have the facts now. But
Yeah,
the
yeah.
workers are talking, yes.
Absolutely.